So we are live, we can start.
Hari Om. Namaste, everyone. As is the tradition with the Indian Knowledge Systems Division, we will start with a Mangalacharana. Anuradhaji, please.
Om Shanno Mitra Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Vritam vadishyami, satyam vadishyami, anmamavatu, tadvaktaramavatu, avatu mam, avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Dhanyavada. So, again, welcome everyone to this overview lecture of Indian Knowledge Systems and Traditional Knowledge Workshop on TKDL, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, CSIR's Institute, workshop on traditional knowledge systems, intellectual property, and people's rights. This is a wonderful initiative that we have jointly taken together with the CSIR TKDL Institute. The reason that the IKS division, as you know, is the Ministry of Education's division dedicated to rejuvenate the Indian knowledge systems and mainstream it for the contemporary world. And as we try to do that, it becomes important that we also be sensitive about the intellectual property rights and also the kind of the knowledge systems that have been handed over to us from generations. We need to be sensitive to who their rightful owners are. What is it that we mean when we create new knowledge in this context of, especially in the context of the traditional knowledge systems and the Indian knowledge systems, and who are their caretakers? How should we proceed about these things? And these are very, very complex issues. And even, as you know, many of you working in these even in contemporary knowledge systems, when you want to patent something, these issues are some of the very most complex legal technical issues, and involve a lot of multidisciplinary approaches and understanding, so that these things can be done in a way that is ethical, correct, and what is beneficial for all. And when you look into in the context of the same thing, same issues about protecting the intellectual property rights in the context of the Indian knowledge systems, the problems of understanding, identifying, and even curating these knowledge systems, and what is defining what is the right knowledge, becomes extremely complicated, because it's a very, very complex area, even and in which the regulations, rules, and even the kind of concepts are still evolving around the world. Because as we are grappling with so much of knowledge that is being created, and increasingly we are tapping into the traditional knowledge systems, this becomes very, very important for us to be aware of what the issues are, how do we protect it, and how do we make sure that the rights of the inventors and the stakeholders and the society in general are not compromised. And in that, who else other than the CSIR's TKDL, which has been the pioneering agency around the world in this domain of protecting the traditional knowledge base of our country. And I'm so happy here to welcome Dr. Vishwajanani Satyagiri, the head of the TKDL unit of the CSIR. And she and her colleagues will be conducting the sensitization workshop, which we at the IKS division and the CSIR's TKDL, we are jointly organizing today. And then next week onwards, we have decided to conduct two basically workshops, week-long workshops, and the registration links and all those things are available on both IKS division website and also on TKDL website, and you can find that later, and we'll also put that in the chat box again. And so the idea is to sensitize all the faculty members, especially this meeting was organized to sensitize our PIs and associated research fellows and the faculty members in the IKS centers and all that. And without any much further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Vishwajanini ji and hand over the session to her. And I'll be keenly be listening to the proceedings of this. Thank you. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste, Prasamurthy. Thank you so much for this wonderful platform with the Indian Knowledge Systems Division of the Ministry of Education. For me, it is totally gratifying because we have only been kind of connecting to the researchers from preventing patents. But today we are on a better platform. Where we can reach out to students, teachers, and others in the education sector and share whatever we have learned so far on our traditional knowledge systems and also how to protect our own rights. So thanks once again for this wonderful opportunity. We are truly grateful for this. I will share my presentation. Do confirm once you see that. So as the presentation gets loaded on, must be why is it we are arranging this workshop together with the IKS Division of the Ministry of Education, talking about traditional knowledge, which we all think is our everyday life matters. And in the context of our everyday life matters, why should we even think about intellectual property rights and people's rights? So as you all know and well appreciate, India is known for its traditional knowledge, and we are very lucky to have inherited such valuable knowledge from our forefathers, be it in terms of Vedas or the Upanishads or even the food that we eat today. For every one of us, our home food is the best. We may eat pizza and pasta once in a while, but we come back to our mothers and grandmothers to see home food, and dal, roti, and rice becomes the staple diet. The medicine that we have today, I think the COVID has taught us immense faith in having our own traditional systems of medicine to provide immunity even from the most dreading diseases like the COVID-19. Metallurgy, I'm sure each of us have an idol at home that we pray to or keep it as a decorative item. And you must be wondering, how did this, idol come up? How did our even forefathers think of making alloys and then building up something that looks so beautiful to the eyes as well as the mind? The textiles that we wear, the clothes that we wear, we again owe it to our forefathers and the temples and the architectural buildings across the country. I think it is something which is mind-blowing, which we cannot even kind of connect to as to how our ancestors could make such wonderful structures when the modern mechanical equipment was not at their disposal. So while we take pride of all of this, why is it that we need to talk about traditional knowledge in today's context? As you all know, when we are talking of traditional knowledge and even the cultural expressions, which include all the music, the creative forms, and even the artistry work, why is it important to talk about it in today's time? The reason being that, while many of our countries similar to India, which has had long histories and has inherited a lot from from their forefathers, that's not the case for most of the developed countries because they do not believe that traditional knowledge exists. So even today, traditional knowledge has no accepted definition at an international level. The only thing that even the World Intellectual Property Organization says is that when we are referring to traditional knowledge, it's about the knowledge, know-how, skills, and practices that has passed on from one generation to the other. And it could be part of our cultural or a spiritual identity. And when we talk of cultural expressions, it is more of a folklore expression. And one would appreciate, it is mostly in terms of the music and all that has been expressed by forms that are not generally written. So either of it, as I said, it doesn't have an acceptable definition and as well as recognition among the world bodies. So it becomes imperative for us to take cognizance of it and then see what is it that we need to do in terms of gaining recognition for the traditions and culture that we have grown up with. the matter gets much more complicated because when we are talking of traditional knowledge, the world over, they have introduced so many terminologies. Because the reason why I'm introducing all of this is because as IKS division, as participants in the programs of the government of India related to traditional knowledge, we need to know what we are doing in the context of global acceptability and as well as passing on the information for global welfare. I think that kind of connects us with the, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam philosophy that India professes, among the world. So when we are talking of traditional knowledge, and as I said, typically we are talking of codified traditional knowledge and as well as the disclosed traditional knowledge. What does it mean? Codified traditional knowledge, which is in some way or the other ordered, organized, and is made available to the public in a form which the communities can understand. Say, for example, when I talk of Shushruta Samhita, Charaka Samhita, or even Ashtanga Hridaya from the Ayurveda, or any of the Upanishads, Vedas, and all that, they're all the codified traditional knowledge. When we are talking of disclosed traditional knowledge, again, that becomes important for us because this is information that is already in public domain. So either the codified traditional knowledge or the disclosed traditional knowledge in today's context of the workshop today, here it basically refers to matter that is already there in public domain and it is a common property of everyone. So largely when we are talking of this form of traditional knowledge, there will be no specific owners of this particular knowledge and the nation here holds the inner rights of this codified traditional knowledge. So why is this important? Again, as I said, there are so many terminologies that have been thrown across. One fixed traditional knowledge, fixed traditional knowledge. So herein you have categories like documented traditional knowledge, non-documented traditional knowledge, again codified, non-codified. Another very important part is the disclosed traditional knowledge, non-disclosed traditional knowledge. So basically, when we are talking of disclosed traditional knowledge, this is the information that is already there in the public domain. When we are talking of non-disclosed traditional knowledge, this is largely the traditional knowledge that is held by the indigenous and local communities and has been passing by the mere word of mouth, that is the oral traditional knowledge. Some of all of this knowledge, be it the codified knowledge or the non-codified knowledge, can be sacred knowledge and can also be a secular traditional knowledge. Again, we need to have a sensitive way in which we handle such information so that the communities are not held at at a level where there is a lot of misbelief or disbelief on such traditional knowledge and are not put to misuse. Further, in today's context, especially now that so many of us are working on traditional knowledge and we are inspired by the traditional knowledge, not only to validate that, but also to create further, it becomes very important to distinguish between what is the native traditional knowledge and what are innovations and creations based on traditional knowledge, because this has a clear identity in terms of the ownership of such information. I've touched about indigenous knowledge because this is again belonging to either individuals or the communities, that is the individual TK or collective TK. And it again, in the context of intellectual property rights, what becomes very important is to distinguish between the commercialized traditional knowledge and the non-commercialized traditional knowledge. So with all this kind of, very different and difficult understanding of traditional knowledge, why is it that we are still harping about traditional knowledge and moving forward with our Indian knowledge systems? As you would all understand, it is very important to grow on the foundation on which our forefathers have built the country, and that is the inheritance, the Indian knowledge systems that we are talking about today. In the context of the innovation, the National IPR policy places a lot of stress on the traditional knowledge digital library, which I'll touch upon a little later, to say that this should be the foundation on which further innovations and R&D can take place. Whereas the national education policy, which most of you are aware of, talks about the knowledge of India and that it needs to be part of the school curriculum, in a manner where it is relevant, and it could include also tribal, indigenous knowledge, including the ways of learning, and it can be across various domains, be it maths, medicine, agriculture, or even sports for that matter. And when I talk about the indigenous and the tribal knowledge, it is also very important that we recognize the national education policy lays emphasis on ethno-medicinal practices, forest management, crop cultivation, and many more. So with this government thrust on traditional knowledge systems, I'd like to touch upon the fact that in CSIR, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, especially if I have to target only the Ayush related activities, we have been conducting activities across various domains. We are a public research organization with 37 laboratories across the country. Specifically in the Ayush related activities, we have almost about 14 to 15 laboratories working on very different aspects, and it could cover agrotechnologies related to medicinal plants, preparing herbal formulations, or even phytopharmaceuticals. We have scale-up and pilot plant activities related to good manufacturing practices of the herbal formulations and extracts. We have Genomics that integrate traditional systems and modern science. We have functional nutritional foods that we prepare, R&D activity from most of the labs that are dealing with food and nutrition work on this. We have a huge database of medicinal plants, close to about 2,000 medicinal plants. Information is included. And of course, the traditional knowledge digital library. And we have a very active collaboration with the Ministry of Ayush to promote research as well as education in traditional medicine as well as integrative medicine. The reason why I'm giving you an idea about the activities that is happening in CSIR is because there is a lot of foundation that has already been laid by the CSIR in terms of promoting traditional knowledge. And here, when we are talking about our activities in the CSIR, I'd like to say that our Honorable Prime Minister is also the president of the CSIR Society, and with deep interest in traditional knowledge to promote it for not only Indian welfare, but also for global good. He had asked us to combine traditional knowledge along with modern science to develop world-class products. And this is in a formal meeting of the CSIR Society way back in 2020. And we've been working with the Ministry of Ayush since then. As you all know, we just completed this Akhil Bharatiya Shiksha Samagam just last 2 days. And our PM had laid emphasis on the NEP policy in terms of the research and innovation capabilities of the country. And here he says that the Rashtriya Shiksha Niti includes traditional knowledge systems and as well as futuristic technologies in a balanced manner and with equal weightage to both. And he also says that, it is not just important that, we recognize all this. He says that भारत की पहचान और परंपराओं में भी दुनिया की दिलचस्पी बढ़ रही है. And that is very important because you may have recognized and understood that the Global Center for Traditional Medicine by the World Health Organization as the first offshore center was set up in Jamnagar just last year. So this is the interest of the world bodies in Indian knowledge systems. And that is when we thought that the TKDL and the Indian Knowledge Systems Division work together to disseminate information not only on the prominence and relevance of our Indian traditional systems, but also in terms of propagating it and promoting it for for the good of all. And while we are doing all this, it is important to recognize the intellectual property rights, the people's rights, and our own rights in the context of whatever we do in terms of further innovating based on our traditional knowledge. So the TKDL is a very unique initiative of the CSIR and the Department of Indian Systems of Medicine and Homeopathy. It was the first of its kind, again in a particular context, which I will touch upon a little later. It is the first database of value-added traditional knowledge information, which makes information available from our diverse Indian languages into English, French, and a few other languages, and it can be understandable by the current generation as well as future generations. As all of you know, the IKS is again focused on furthering research and societal applications based on our Indian knowledge systems. And the vision, the drishti of the IKS division is about the unique Indian perspectives that makes this knowledge system globally valuable. And I think we all have gathered here only recognizing the importance and the value that our Indian knowledge systems provide. So we signed an agreement with the MOU with the Indian knowledge systems from the TKDL unit. And the broad objectives of this collaboration has been, as the title says, traditional knowledge, intellectual property rights, and people's rights. So here what we wish to do is that conduct educational training programs, seminars, webinars, conferences, exhibitions, workshops, and whoever would like to get involved. And typically what we are looking at as in terms of beneficiaries is universities, institutions of national importance, R&D laboratories, government agencies, and even the private sector entities, especially those linked with the IKS division and support received from the Government of India. So this was just done last month on June 30th of 2023. So here, this is basically to launch the program, the workshops, as Professor Murthy has already given you an overview. The first batch would be between the 7th and 11th of August. It's between 6 to 7 p.m. Every day it would be a 1-hour program. The second batch would be on 21st to 25th of August between 4 to 5 p.m. And today what I will have connected with you is to give you an overview of what we would be doing in these workshops. I would urge all of you to please pass on the information to whoever would be interested in the Indian knowledge systems, so they could, gain from these workshops and contribute to the betterment of our country as well as the world based on our traditional knowledge. So the structure of the workshop is such that on day one, we will cover the Indian traditional knowledge, providing an overview of the expanse and significance. The day two would cover the fundamentals of the intellectual property rights with specific case studies. The third day would cover protection of traditional knowledge. So we will be introducing new terminologies that you may or may not be aware of, that is defensive protection and positive protection of traditional knowledge. Herein, we will refer to the TKDL in depth so that you would understand the kind of work that goes into, so that we draw concordance between the traditional terminologies and the modern parlance. Day 4, we would focus on handling and working with traditional knowledge, the ethical aspects. Day 5, we will just give you a glimpse of, how TK-inspired innovations has immense potential and what would be the road ahead. We would be closing this workshop with an assessment of all the participants with an MCQ-based test. There would be about 25, questions, and whoever has, got about 80% in the MCQ will be given the certificate. So this would be the overall outline of the workshop. I'll just give you a glimpse of what we would be covering in each of the day. As I said, day 1 of the workshop would cover the expanse and significance of the Indian traditional knowledge. So we will cover in terms of the health and wellness, food and nutrition, chemistry, agriculture and allied areas, mathematics, metals, minerals and materials, ecology and environment, education, sport, art and culture, just to kind of familiarize with you the expanse of the traditional knowledge, especially, that many of the projects are also being supported by the Indian knowledge systems. So just to kind of give you an example, the kind of information that we will be covering is, if in case I talk about the Indian knowledge systems, all of you might have heard about the Triphala, which is a very powerful Ayurveda formulation, and it is used for variety of, indications, afflictions of the human body, the human health. It could range from, peptic ulcer to pitta diseases, sensitive gums, asthma, liver diseases, and many more, depending on the carrier and the format of the Triphala formulation. Similarly, if I consider one particular disease, say I take vitiligo, which is a skin disorder where there is loss of melanocytes from the skin, you look at Ayurveda, you look at Unani, you look at Siddha, you look at even homeopathy, you look at yoga, and even the folk medicine. is a variety of treatments available for vitiligo. So that is, a different kind of expanse of our traditional knowledge. So here there is an example of how one drug can, cater to different diseases. And if you consider one disease, there is an immense options in terms of the treatments that are available from our own traditional knowledge systems. Moving on with Indian metallurgy, just giving you an example of woods. Today, the buzzword is high carbon steel. I'm sure, when you talk of high carbon steel, nobody would be able to connect it with the wood steel that our ancestors prepared. I'm sure many of you would have also heard the word Damascus sword. Okay, that was one of the swords which were, the highest quality in terms of the steel and as well as the, the use for which this sword was made. So here, the wood steel has its roots again to India. And it is, some people say it is the Kannada word, some people say it is the Tamil word, and it is based on the word ukku, which stands for steel. And this wood steel has about 1% to 1.5% of carbon in it, which is higher than the usual steel having less than 0.5% of the carbon. So this is the kind of, the quality of the steel that was prepared years, thousands of years ago. And, somehow we have been losing the, the skills as well as the value of our own traditional methodologies. This morning, I just kind of did a Google Scholar search for the high carbon steel and Damascus. You can see about 509 results I had got. And if I restrict only to, articles that have been published since 2022, this is the number. And you can see that, even as of 2023, there are articles which talk about the high carbon steels. So our traditional knowledge will still have relevance if in case we are able to validate it and put it to good use. Moving on, there is an example from traditional agricultural practices of, I would like to talk about Punab Jala, which is the world's oldest fermented liquid organic manure. And this is mentioned in Vriksha Ayurveda as well as Krishi Parashara. And it is not only as a manure, but it is also used as a growth promoter as well. The original Punam Jala that is mentioned in our ancient texts is all made from, waste material from the farmer's field. It is made of animal bones, marrow, blood, fish, etc., along with all the plant waste. And it also includes sesame cake, germinated oat bean, and rice husk. And it's all fermented and used. So Professor Vayal Nene from the GB Pant University in Uttarakhand worked further on it. In 2004, he made a herbal Punam Jala, which was improvised in the year 2012. And this has eliminated the animal waste, and it is largely based on the plant waste alone. It has also used weeds, which are generally found in the farmer's field, for its fungicidal and insecticidal properties. And this herbal Punam Jala was validated across many different farmers' fields, across different crops, and it has been found to increase productivity to almost 20 to 30%. Again, doing, if you go back to understand whether Punam Jala has relevance today, in addition to what I talked about the herbal Punam Jala, a very recent article as of January 2023 talks about the oldest manure of the animal waste and how it can be used as a biostimulant. So I believe, and I also have a lot of confidence that our Indian traditional knowledge systems with the right amount of validation and R&D can be used extensively, not only in our country, but also we can provide this as information to the other world partners. Day 2 of the workshop, we will be conducting, talking about the fundamentals of intellectual property rights with specific case studies. So we will talk about copyrights, we'll talk about patents, we'll also talk about trademarks, we'll also talk about industrial designs, geographical indications, and also trade secrets, although in India, we do not recognize trade secrets. So just to kind of give an overview, the different, IPR types, how and what for it is used, and how long have we been, how long would this protection last, what are the rights that would be made available to the owners of these intellectual property types. Is there a statutory framework for that? Who is the authority? All this would be explained in day 2 of the program. So, to give you further details on, we'll be talking about patents, we'll be talking about copyrights, we'll be talking about trademarks, industrial designs. For every one of these IPR type, we will also provide you case studies so that you would be able to understand not only from the traditional knowledge perspective, but also in terms of the contemporary science, how can we protect our own rights through IP. So here we will touch upon geographical indications, the integrated circuits, as well as the plant varieties. Often when we are talking of intellectual property, we forget that, plant variety registration is also an IPR tool. And here in this particular workshop, we will lay a lot of emphasis, especially from the rights of the farmers and also the land races that we have in the country. So when we are talking of IPR, it is not necessary that, we can protect an intervention with only one IPR type. Just to give you an example, if I talk of a mobile phone, you can see there are 4 different IPR types that I mentioned on the slide: patents, trademarks, designs, and copyright. Depending on, what is the component in the phone, one can either protect it through patent or through trademark or design or copyright or multiples of it. So we have an immense amount of protection when we are talking about the intellectual property rights. And this is what I would like you to understand, because based on our TK, if in case you're innovating further, what should be the ways that in which you can protect the rights is what is going to be important. So moving on, day 3 of the workshop, we will talk about the traditional knowledge and its protections. As I mentioned, there are very definitive terms called defensive protection and less positive protection. We will also give you an overview of the TKDL during this particular session. When it refers to defensive protection, it is to kind of say that, okay, here we have traditional knowledge, which we believe is a common knowledge to all the Indians here of our country. When I refer to Indian traditional knowledge, this is largely the disclosed or the codified traditional knowledge. So when somebody else comes and then takes an illegitimate right, especially an IPR right on it, and we are defending our traditional knowledge from such rights, it's called the defensive protection. When I talk of positive protection, we know, as I mentioned, the oral traditional knowledge, where either an individual or a community holds that knowledge. We need to ensure that their rights are protected. And not only their rights are protected, we also need to find ways of promoting their traditional knowledge so that it becomes better means of their livelihood. So we will talk about all this in day 3 of the workshop. So here, what are the elements that we will be covering? As I said, we will be giving you a context of the TK in India. What is codified knowledge? What is non-codified knowledge? We'll touch upon the codified text. We'll touch upon manuscripts and the oral traditional knowledge as well. We will give you an overview of the protection of traditional knowledge, not only from the Indian perspective, but also the international context. We will give you information on the defensive protection, what is the role of databases and registries, and again, touching upon the TKDL here, what is it that we have done until now? And now with the cabinet approval that provides for wider access of the TKDL, what is it that we intend to do as we move forward? What are the advantages and concerns related with defensive protection? We'll also touch upon the People's Biodiversity Register, which is under the National Biodiversity Authority. This Biodiversity Register is a tool wherein they collect information on genetic resources and the associated traditional knowledge. So this is something, I would say a cousin of the TKDL in terms of the oral traditional knowledge. We will give you information of that. We will talk about the positive protection of TK, especially because we do not have any legal statutes in the country to protect TK per se. We do not have any sui generis legal system in the country. So we'll touch upon all the other provisions in the Government of India frameworks. We'll also give you an international perspective of how TK is viewed by the world bodies and what does WIPO do in terms of protecting traditional knowledge, not only that of India, but the world over. We will give you information of the misappropriation cases. Misappropriation is the terminology that is used when, as I said, when the rights of somebody else is taken away by somebody else for vested interest. So we'll give you examples of how turmeric was patented, patents were granted, basmati rice patents were granted, neem patent was granted, and how India fought to protect our own rights so that these patents, we had to go through a litigation to make sure that these patents are either revoked or amended. So with this as a background, the TKDL was set up in the year 2001. We'll provide you information how TKDL helps in terms of the Patent Act, especially the 3P, wherein it is only a national provision. And here the 3P refers to the inventions that are not patentable, and traditional knowledge cannot be patented in the country, not just us. Nobody in the country can patent traditional knowledge. So we will provide you information of this 3P as well as the TKDL. What do we do in the TKDL, especially from the context that, TKDL is an interdisciplinary activity. We connect traditions with technology. How do we draw concordance with the modern parlance? How do we make our traditional knowledge understandable by patent examiners worldwide? When I talk about patent examiners in today's context, when the TKDL is going to be widened for other users, how is it going to be of use to all the users of the TKDL? So we will touch upon all of this in terms of, not only the traditional knowledge information, how digitization has helped, how do we go about doing the digitization, what is the value add that we do in terms of, transcribing the information. I repeat, it is not a mere translation or transliteration, but it is a transcription of, transcribing information of our traditional knowledge in modern parlance so that it is of use to our current generation as well as our future generation. We will touch upon the Government of India frameworks for protecting TK. And here are some of these, IPR tools like geographical indications, industrial designs, creative art forms wherein copyright can be taken, as I already mentioned, new varieties of plants, and as well as the Biological Diversity Act, especially from the PBR perspective. As I mentioned, it is a record of genetic resources and the associated TK. We will briefly touch upon the Scheduled Tribes and the other traditional forest dwellers Forest Rights Act of the 2006 in the context of how people's rights can be protected. Day 4 of the workshop will be focused on the ethical aspects. Here it is very important. So far, whatever I have mentioned in terms of the TKDL or the patent, especially Section 3P, it is a defensive form of protection because we are defending our traditional knowledge from being patented by somebody else, so that nobody gains ownership of our traditional knowledge. But when we are talking of oral traditional knowledge, it becomes incumbent on us to promote their knowledge for their own good. So that is what we will be touching upon, because when we refer to oral traditional knowledge, you need to understand we are connecting it with the older generation who have absolutely no clue about the intellectual property rights or their own rights for that matter. Of course, in recent times, we have got to understand that there is a greater recognition and acknowledgement of their contributions to the society and to the nation. But we need to understand that, I refer to this African proverb, when an old woman dies, a library burns to the ground. When an old man dies, a library burns to the ground. We are on the verge of losing such valuable information, and it becomes important for documentation. So when I talk about documentation, we need to understand we are, accessing some information which has not been disclosed in public so far. It is the undisclosed form, and the rights of this oral traditional knowledge rest with the individual or the communities to which it belongs. So here we need to handle it with great sensitivity. And this particular, session of the workshop will be focused on that, trying to share our experiences and knowledge on how do we handle codified manuscripts and as well as the oral traditional knowledge. We will touch upon the rights of the knowledge holders, and especially in the context that there is no legal provision to protect their rights. And what happens when we take that information of the tribal, the individual or the community knowledge, and we do our research and put our research results in the open? What does it happen? There could be potential for misappropriation. There could be also, by putting this undisclosed information in public domain so far, there could be loss of livelihoods to the people. So we will be touching upon all these aspects, and we will touch upon what needs to be done. Okay, we have pointed out the challenges and the difficulties of putting such information in public domain. But what is it that we need to do, having taken cognizance of the fact that it is linked to people's livelihoods? So we'll talk about the access and documentation, what needs to be done when we are doing research and development, especially from the context of sharing benefits. The access benefit sharing becomes very important. Under the Biological Diversity Act, there are provisions for the access benefit sharing, but when you understand, when you look at our Indian traditional knowledge, it is not restricted to only genetic resources and the associated knowledge. We have examples where it has got nothing to do with genetic resources. So how can we adapt and adopt the BDA provisions or even the CBD provisions for enabling access and benefit sharing? So we will talk about this dissemination, global best practices, and what is it that we as institutions need to do in terms of the ethical documentation. So far we have, from the TKDL, because the national IPR policy tells us to also include oral traditional knowledge in the TKDL database, we are handling it with great sensitivity and respect to the population concerned. Here, what we would like to recommend is we need to ensure there is empathy, equality, and partnership when we are dealing with knowledge of the individuals or communities which has not been disclosed to the public as a codified form yet. So here we talk about the three cardinal principles: free and prior informed consent. Here it is not just important that we go and tell the communities, yes, I want to record your information, I want to document your information, I want to do research with my information, with your information. It is very important that we understand what are their objectives, what are their needs, and how do they want us to keep this information. Okay, even if they agree for us to document that information, do they agree for us to put it into public domain? So whatever is the expressed consent of the knowledge holders need to be respected, and then further action be taken. Moving forward, once we have done our R&D, very often, especially when we do ethnobotanical work or ethnomedicinal work and all that, we do the work and immediately publish a paper putting that information in public domain. There are several articles from India and even abroad where we have forgotten to acknowledge the contributions of the knowledge holders. Nowhere have we mentioned about the free and prior informed consent, nor have we acknowledged the contributors of that particular knowledge. So what we are trying to recommend is that where applicable and where necessary, include the knowledge holders as authors or even inventors on patents that wherein you have further innovation on the TK. And wherever, if in case you are a company or you are starting a commercial enterprise, ensure that there is some partnership role to the knowledge holders. And the third cardinal principle that we are talking about is the access benefit sharing. As I mentioned, we have accessed somebody's information which has been part of their livelihoods for so long, okay? And we are working on it, we have improvised on it, and we have innovated further, and we are putting it in public domain for the good of all, okay? But then we are reaping commercial benefits out of such knowledge. So here what we are trying to say is that, okay, you have accessed the information, please ensure that the benefits also go back to the communities. So here we will touch upon the details of, what can be, the different forms of benefit sharing. And there is a guidance document that we have brought out. It is in its final shape, but we will touch upon the essential aspects of what we are trying to recommend in the guidance document. The last day of the workshop is what is very crucial, because so far what we have taught to you is about our traditional knowledge. We had told you about the intellectual property rights, again in the context of TK and the defensive and the positive protection. What needs to be the ethical road that we need to take when we are handling oral traditional knowledge. The life doesn't stop there, because what is very important for us in today's context is to innovate further, validate the traditional knowledge and innovate further so that we can address all the sustainable development goals. Our traditional knowledge systems are known for their sustainability. We need to ensure that moving forward, we are able to cater to that. So here there are different reports that say how our traditional systems can play a role in each of the SDGs. We will touch upon that. We will also touch upon examples of how TK-inspired innovations are, gaining prominence world over. And we'll start with that, and then we will give you a workshop closure through a test where we will be assessing the participants for their understanding of all the elements that we have covered so far. So as I mentioned, it will be a 25 question MCQ based test, and people who have gained about 80% will be issued the certificate jointly by the IKS and us. So just to kind of give you an example, when we are talking of SDG 2, which is on ending hunger and achieving food security, as you very well know, our foods are of importance. The genetic diversity that we have today in the country, including the land races, need to be maintained and promoted because that they cater to the local environment. And as our PM keeps saying, vocal for local, that is what is very important. Healthy lives are our systems of medicine have been and is still being used for the well-being of all, be it health or wellness. So this is again relevant for goal 3 of the SDG. The last but not the least on this particular slide is about having an inclusive and equitable quality education. Here, what is very important to realize is that we need to be able to recognize the local abilities, including the local languages, and wherever possible, ensure that the learning is through the local abilities and the languages, and that way we'll be able to contribute to SDG 4. And this is also very important in the context of the NEP 2020. I think, our Honorable Prime Minister also mentioned that, not knowing languages should not be treated as a negative aspect, and everybody needs to be moving forward with an inclusivity. So I'd like to close this particular overview saying that our role, be it the TKDL or the IKS, is about protecting, preserving, and promoting the traditional knowledge systems of India. I look forward to all your participation to ensuring that the vision of our country towards promoting the systems for the welfare of all is achieved. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vishwajanji. Namaste. Thank you. That was a wonderful overview of the whole thing. I think Anuradhaji, I think we can take some questions here onwards.
Yes,
please.
yes, we can take some questions. So request any participants, if you have questions, to please raise your hand, digital arm, and then we'll unmute you to ask your question. And those listening to us on YouTube, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them on the chat and we'll address them to Vishwajanani ji. Any questions? Excellent initiative. Okay. Okay. Any questions from the group here?
So in case you would want us to include anything specific in the workshop, you could write to us because, we may go with our own thoughts. If in case there is any specific need from anybody, we could address it in the presentation itself or at least address it separately during the workshop.
Okay. Ramachandran ji has a question. I think Ramachandran ji, we'll unmute you. Please ask your question. Yes, Ramachandran ji, please ask your question.
Namaste all. Hope I am audible.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for this wonderful session. It is rather than a question, I would like to learn from you. How can we get some support in terms of any experimental projects, if at all we are considering for undergraduate and postgraduate students who are interested in this traditional knowledge system? Because there are few things which need certain experimental statistics also. It is, of course, looking into some ancient texts, we can get some concepts and ideas. However, the terminologies that we are using today are quite different from of those days. So if we have to correlate that and authentically say, yes, this is the science which was existing then also, or maybe something which we need to explore, it also needs some experimental backing. May I know, or if you can suggest on this, if we can apply for that, or will there be any website or links where we can get to know about and approach you regarding these things? Thank you.
So I think I will clarify that at the CSIR, we do not provide any funds. We are an intramural agency. But if in case you would, so far in the systems of medicine, we have drawn these, concordance with modern terminologies. So if you need any help with regards to any of, a better understanding of any of the shloka or getting, modern parlance, that we will be able to help you on any specific case. But in terms of very general this one, I think I will let Professor Murthy address it.
So thank you so much, Ramachandraji. So there are many schemes that the Indian Knowledge Systems Division is currently funding and things like that. For example, we have a internship program for the interns. If you want to collect some preliminary data and do those kind of train the interns, and then if you want to do really deep scholarly interdisciplinary research, there is actually a research program where we fund theme-based research programs which are highly interdisciplinary. And I would urge you to take a look at the website of the Indian Knowledge Systems Division, iksindia.org. And there are a lot of details there, including the type of projects that we fund, and all those things. And today, incidentally, is the deadline for submitting one of the research proposals today, 11:59 p.m. But I would urge you to look into the kind of documentation that we provide there, very detailed documentation about what is expected, what is kind of the integration that we are expecting, what kind of experimental projects that we have supported, and things like that. It's a really vast number of areas that we have funded, and we are creating that kind of ecosystem for the Indian Knowledge Systems, deep scholarly research in the Indian Knowledge Systems Division. And I saw just one project, somebody asking if somebody in the mechanical engineering can submit a proposal to Indian Knowledge Systems. Definitely you can, but it has to be integrated. See, the differentiating factor with for submitting a proposal to basically a SERP or DST or versus Indian Knowledge Systems Division is that the same level of technical competency is expected even in the Indian Knowledge Systems Division proposals, but with a change that it has to integrate Indian knowledge systems also. To give you one or two examples, there are basically, for example, there is something called a Vajralepa, a which soft metal alloy, which can be made with four soft metals like copper, lead, tin, and mercury. And the alloy that comes out is very hard one. So there is a team in IIT Indore which is looking at using this alloy, very hard, tough alloy, to coat the ball bearings so that you can reduce the friction in heavy machinery. So just to give you one example of a project, and then there is another project in IIT Harvard where people are looking at 3D printing. How do you make sure that the composite 3D printing happens properly, the adherence of layers happens properly, and things like that. There are projects in IIT BHU. There are projects almost all across the country, across all institutions, not just IITs, but across all institutions. So you should. I will request again you to please take a look at the proposals that we have already funded on our website, iksindia.org. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a question by Dr. Anjali Kumari about any standard protocol to gather traditional knowledge guidelines. We will, give you information as to how we do with regards to the codified traditional knowledge, and also give example of the People's Biodiversity Register PBR, which is, having a standard protocol in terms of collection of information. The other comment is about, being bilingual. Yes, we will try our best to be bilingual to the extent possible.
And the Indian Knowledge Systems Division is multilingual. You can submit research proposals in any of the 22 languages in the 8th schedule of our country. So, and we will conduct even the interviews in that same language.
Balachandranji, I think again has a question.
Yes, ma'am. Namaskar.
Yes, please.
I'm Dr. Bhalchandra, IPR coordinator of Ramdeva College, Nagpur. According to Indian Patent Act, this traditional knowledge cannot be patented. So how to tackle such kind of situations?
Innovate further. You cannot get patents, that is true. But further innovations, like perhaps you have a very difficult process in the traditional knowledge, okay, for the same product, but you're developing a much robust process now. You can get a patent for the new process. So we will give you examples during the workshop as to how patents are still given. We do not come in way completely of giving a blanket rejection of all patents. It all depends on the merit of the innovation that has been made by the inventor. So we will touch upon that. But when I mentioned there are other Government of India frameworks with regards to IPR. So you can have IPR in terms of geographical indications, especially you have products like very recently the Ladakh woodwork carving was given a GI. So that kind of empowers the community who is working with such kind of work, as a IPR legal protection, so that they can get better remuneration for the work that they are doing. Then you have designs through which you can protect. I mentioned about the plant varieties. So they are indirect measures by which a traditional knowledge can still be protected. But you'll have to bear in mind when we are talking of any of these IPR rights, they are limited by the time and the jurisdiction.
Okay.
IPR is a
Thank you,
very
ma'am. Thank you.
expensive
Thank you.
affair. Yes. Okay, would there be separate workshops?
Any
for
other?
traditional
Anybody
practice?
else on YouTube? I'll just check if there's somebody on YouTube who might have a
Sure.
question.
For medicinal practices specifically, I mean, we do keep conducting workshops on the TKDL for the Ayush communities. So if in case you would be interested, you could write to head TKDL@CSIR. I put it in the chat message, my email ID. You can write to us, and then when we are holding any such workshop, we will, or lecture, you would be able to connect with us on that. This workshop, we are trying to keep it subject agnostic so that more people can benefit. As we move forward, we can have specific ones. Will research proposals, I think that's for the IKS division, Binumol from. Professor Murthy, I think there's a question on proposal containing comparison of architectural knowledge systems of India and Southeast.
Yeah, I saw that. But I mean, things are typically very written in very much detail in the proposal documents. I would refer them to the website and the proposal document.
There's just one thing, if I may add here. Somebody from YouTube is requesting, they thought that the 80% eligibility is for the exam. So then can you reduce that? It's a bit high for the exam.
No,
So
we can increase it to 90%. We will not decrease it.
No, the point was that 80% was more for the attendance. You have to have 80% attendance and pass the exam to be able to get the certificate. Because
Yes.
many people will register, you're required to attend all the 5 days because it's going to be a 5-hour program. So 5 days, every day for 1 hour. For the 2 workshops, they're designated at different times during the day. But please follow that. And yeah, 80%. And we'll request you to keep your videos on as much as possible so that we know that you're listening.
Sorry, couldn't stop my inner teacher from coming out.
Yeah, no, the idea is basically it's not about just getting a certificate. This is a very
Exactly.
serious objective. And if we appreciate the importance of the course that TKDL is going to, offer to us, because now that there is a conscious promotion of research in the IKS domain, I think it becomes very important to simultaneously know about how to protect the information that you are going to be, getting out of your research work. So this workshop will be critical in helping you evolve in a very, constructive manner as a scholar with your work. So I think there's also somebody who's saying GOI. Have you seen that question? We know more.
Yeah, we already answered that.
We've addressed that one, yes. Yes. All right. Yes. So is there anything else that?
So the workshop, maybe the link you can share once again.
Yoshi, can you share the poster once again, please?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So the eligibility for the workshop itself is anybody who is working on IKS. We have already posted the links to register. Please share it widely in your community so that as many can join. This opportunity will come again after a while. It's not going to come like immediately. So please make the most of this first possibility. We also have this big IKS Kumbha coming up in September. And we might have different quizzes and all that will emerge from this workshop. So stay tuned and get as
Hence
many.
the 90% comment.
I thought that would be 100%. Less.
That would be the eligibility to enter the quiz. Anyway.
You've shared the link? Share the poster. The poster of the workshops. Share the workshop. You now on share it here now on top. We're just waiting to share the poster. Yes.
Yeah, I have.
Can you see
So
the
this is
poster?
the information about the workshop. Okay, so there's a QR code. You can scan and register it. Register yourself on a Google link that is there. There will be 2 workshops depending on your convenience. You can choose the first batch or the second batch. It's between 7 to 11, the first one, from 6 to 7 p.m. And the second one would be from 21st to 25th, 4 to 5 p.m. So we look
I would also
forward
like
to
to add
having
that
you.
can I just add that the participation will be per workshop. It's not,
Yes.
40% here and 40% in the other one. So per workshop, 80% attendance.
No, it would be only one workshop, right?
That's what. No, I'm saying if people want to, they consider registering in both, and then you'll claim here and you'll claim that, that would not be convenient for us. So
Yes.
just please consider just being as helpful as you can to, from an administrative point of view, to help yourselves actually.
I think we should probably close now. I think it is a great time.
We're just putting the IKS website on the chat as well.
Already did that, Anuradha-ji.
Website has been put up?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Done, yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Then we'll end with the
Vishnu. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
having me here. And thank you all. We'll be looking forward for you all to register and participate in huge numbers. I think we got already 270 registrations is what basically Kautilya was saying. So we'll look forward to many, many more of you registering and participating in this workshop so that, as Anuradha ji was alluding to, there could be some other competitions based on this one in the future. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to
Namaste,
having you all at the workshop.
Thank you. We'll just end with a Shanti mantra.
Yes, please.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you.